Guys, thank you all so much for coming tonight. We're very excited to share our information with you, and it's exciting to see so many bright, shining faces at the end of a long Monday. For the athletes that are here, thank you for showering. We appreciate that. Just kidding. No. But let me just take a moment. My name is Alana Reyes. I'm the Director of Counseling, and I just want to introduce the wonderful team that I work with. So first, we have Dana Kieran. She is working with students with the last names A through F. And so if you haven't met her, I encourage you to reach out to her, as she'll be working with your students as they go through the college process. Next, we have Brad McAdam, who works with students with last names G through O. And then we have Ms. Valerie Chesley. She works with students last names P through Z. And then we have Mr. Bob Palermo, who is our college and career coordinator. And we have some other wonderful speakers who will be introducing themselves when they come up here tonight. So we have a bunch of handouts. I hope you grabbed them when you walked in. If not, please, take some when you leave. Quick rundown of the agenda. You can read. I am not going to read it to you. But we're going to try and kind of go through the basics of at least fly through kind of the basics of the application process. We're going to talk about the Pathways program, which is an incredible opportunity, the programs and opportunities that Liz McCarthy offers for students that receive additional services. We're going to go through Naviance, and then really what you want to hear from is Barry Bradbury, who is the admissions representative from Elon University, and trust me, he is way more interesting than anything we have to say. I'm setting him up. So first I'd like to introduce Liz McCarthy. She's going to talk about, she's our transitions coordinator, and talk a little bit about some of the services she provides.
My name is Elizabeth McCarthy, and I'm the transition coordinator here at Falls Church City, and for Falls Church City. I work with students who have any documented disability to plan for after high school. So I work with all students aged 14 to 22. So for some students, that means finding jobs right out of high school and vocational training opportunities while in high school. And for other students, it's to help prepare them for post-high school education. My role has been, along with this great group of people that I get to work with, I want students kind of figure out their focus for the schools. Actually, working on Naviance. If they need help with Naviance extra support, they can come to me as well. But I can sit down and help with students with the self-advocacy piece of school. It's huge. Helping students realize what they're going to need once they leave the kind of safe walls of GM that we provide them with, and those tools of how to ask what they need, and how to communicate with professors. And also sometimes it can be hard. A lot of times when they have a couple schools maybe that they're choosing between, trying to tease out which school is going to be best according to what supports are offered at that school. So I am kind of there for like the end, I can help and support along the way for finding and applying and things like that. But once it gets down to kind of the nitty gritty of how am I going to be successful, how do I approach a professor, what are some accommodations that are realistic in college, what are some accommodations that I know may not be granted at certain schools, but for other small schools or different schools with bigger support services, it may be granted. So I am here for a resource. We have a Future Quest, which is a huge college and career symposium for students and parents. In December 2nd at George Mason University, there's a lot of workshops, like a title of one is There Are No IEPs in College. So it kind of teases out what services are offered or mandated by law for colleges to offer our students. There's also financial workshops for services that may be covered, and also different programming for assistive technology. So it's wonderful. There's also a resource fair where a lot of local schools, and we have a lot of schools coming from West Virginia, Pennsylvania. They set up their booths to also give information on their support service office. So that is December 2nd, George Mason University. Once we get the save the date flyer, it'll be up on the counseling webpage. So let me know if you need any help. I am here. Door's always open, and most of the time I start meeting with the seniors right away in the fall just to check in, show them my face, say hello, what's your plan? If I'm really needed, I'll stick around. If not, then I can be someone who can be pulled in as well.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Monika Gomez, and I'm a counselor at Northern Virginia Community College. I'm going to share with you just briefly about a program that I work with here at George Mason High School, but also want to take a minute just to put a plug in for dual enrollment because we do offer several options for students here. So if you have other younger students that are sophomores, juniors, they can also consider dual enrollment as an option or alternative to the IB program that they offer here, but the school has really worked hard in the last couple of years to provide more offerings to students through dual enrollment with Northern Virginia Community College, so that is an option for students. And I always like to make sure I kind of put that plug in so that you're aware that the IB program does have another alternative for students that are maybe considering NOVA or just want a different route to accruing some college credits without doing the IB classes. So, but the program that I'm here to talk to you about is called Pathway to the Baccalaureate, and I've been working here at George Mason, for 6-7 years maybe, with this program, and I come in as a counselor to work with students to get them ready for college if they're considering NOVA as their first step out of high school to start their college education. So this program is really, it's a college access program. It provides additional support. So I work with a great team of counselors, with Mr. Palermo, and even with Ms. McCarthy, to provide students with kind of additional supports to get ready for college, to make sure that if they have any kind of barrier to college that they feel could impact their success and just even getting to college, that we can kind of help break that down for them and really kind of help them navigate the process a little bit more easily. And what we do is I come into the high school. I work here on Thursdays once a week. I usually start my hours in October, so I'll be here starting October 19th, I believe it is. And I have an office down in the Performing Arts Hallway, the E120. And I work with students, really kind of giving them kind of a step-by-step on how to prepare for NOVA. So there is an application process. I did leave some applications out on the table, and I see some of them are already gone, but if you do need additional copies, the counselors have a stack, and Mr. Palermo has a stack in the Career Center. But students who really feel like they want to get a college degree, that they're capable of college-level work, but maybe have some difficulties that they feel would impede them to be successful, and they feel like starting at the community college would be more beneficial to them. This is a great program, just kind of helping them navigate their way to make sure that they are successful in getting there and also getting through college successfully. So what do we do with the students? So while in high school, my work with the students, I work with them individually, but also in small groups. We do workshops for them that allows them to get information on college process. So it could be anything from applications to placement testing that we require at the community college, to advising for coursework, and even helping them pick and register for their first semester of college courses. So it kind of runs the gamut. We do provide a lot of information about financing college, how to apply for scholarships and things like that as well. Once they leave here and are enrolled at the college, at the community college, we have a team of counselors at each of our campuses that will work with them. So they basically are in a cohort, and they work together to make sure that they are accomplishing their goals, whether they want to stay at NOVA for 1 year and then transfer, or if they want to take advantage of our guaranteed admissions programs that we have with a lot of the Virginia schools and even some out-of-state schools to get an associate's degree and then transfer under guaranteed admission. So there really is a lot of support built into the program for students through different programming, opportunities for leadership, things that they get access to at George Mason, since George Mason is our main partner in this program. Those students do not have to transfer to George Mason to participate in the program. And then beyond that, they do get assistance with the transfer process, whether they're looking at George Mason University or other colleges, and they just get that support to kind of make that plan and successfully transition to a four-year college. So that is our goal. So if students are interested in this program, they can self-identify that they would like to be considered, and in order to be considered, they do have to fill out an application, and those are the kind of ivory-colored applications that you may have seen on the tables. They have to fill that out and submit it to their school counselor, and then we get a recommendation from the school counselor, and then we review them and send out decisions usually by the Christmas break, the holiday break. The application deadline is November 9th this year, so students do have to submit that by the deadline to be considered. If NOVA is on the radar at all, I highly encourage students to consider this as an option. This is the only time of year that they can apply to the program. They can always choose to go to NOVA at any point, but to be part of our pathway program, they do have to submit the application by the deadline. So I encourage students who are thinking about NOVA, even if it's a backup plan, to submit an application to be considered, and then they get to work with me. If they make a decision to go on to a four-year school or do something else, then they can always just notify us, so it's not a binding decision. They can withdraw from the program at any time, but it does provide that support if they need it during the time that they're actively considering various options. So thank you very much.
So as I fix the computer because they cannot see us for the videotaping, guys, you're going to get a lot of information tonight. I know regardless of where you are in the process, it can feel overwhelming. You'll probably hear only part of what we say. We will have everything up on our website in just a few days, probably by the end of the week or so, with all the information that's presented tonight. So, hopefully just take a deep breath. We're here to help you. We're here to work with you. For some of you, whether you've done this with 3 older children or this is your first and you're like, what do I do? We are here to help through the whole process. So please take a deep breath and know that we're happy to guide you through all of this. All right, Mr. Williams.
So some of the nuts and bolts. Some of these things, if you should be on your radar, seniors, and if you're past that, then maybe you have some of these completed, and even better, maybe you have all of them completed. But you want to work toward these things. So signed up, taken ACT or SAT, visited colleges. Attended college fairs, and there are a number of those that will come up this fall, and those will continually be published in the College Career Center update. Parent brag sheet for parents that can be found in the updates that come out, also on the College Career website under the Counseling tab. Schedule a meeting with me, seniors. Seniors should also schedule a meeting with your school counselor once you have turned in your senior worksheet. That one runs through Naviance. The parent brag sheet runs outside of Naviance. Should be working on narrowing your college list at this time, and that's something that I can assist with, and your school counselors, of course. And check on the deadlines, strategize about what type of deadlines you want to aim for, and working on a college essay and getting that into good form as well. With that, we have a little workshop that runs every day after school with Mrs. Tews, and she can give you some assistance with that. It's a real sort of broad overview of who does what a little bit, and we'll dig down into some of these a little more as we go forward. So, who sends what? Students, you are sending your application and essays, which are part of those applications. How? You're going to do that through admissions websites, Common App, or even by paper for some. What's the student counselor going to send? They're going to send official transcripts, secondary school reports, counselor recommendation letters if needed, and how's that going to happen? Students are going to make a transcript request through Naviance. Teachers, they are going to send teacher recommendation letters, Common App teacher evaluation forms if needed, and non-GM recommenders. And students will make those requests to their teacher through Naviance, or have those sent directly to college or university. And ACT or SAT scores, students have to make requests through the College Board or ACT to have those sent. And the goal of this is finding the right fit. So helping you to do that, you want to talk to the college reps when they're here. You can make a point, you can set up your chance to attend those college visits through Naviance, and do that at least one day in advance. Visit schools if you haven't already, and again, college fairs. Use search tools in Naviance and elsewhere. You can even call the schools or email the schools with specific questions, and sometimes there's an opportunity to interview or talk to local alumni as well, which can be a valuable thing to do as well for students. With that right fit, You want a balanced portfolio so that you have some schools that are your reach schools, one or two maybe. You want to have most of your schools in that target area, schools that are going to be a good possibility of getting in, and then you want to have one or two safety or likely schools so that you'll be all set come the spring for admission.
So actually, we will have the opportunity at the end of the application process, when we're done talking about this, we will pass around, because we're being videotaped, we have a microphone we'll pass around, and then this is, again, a general overview kind of night. If you have specific questions about your child, which I don't think you're going there, we encourage you to make an appointment with your counselor, email or call them. They'd be happy to discuss your child. I just want to introduce really quickly Jane Rasmussen. She is our PTSA College and Career Liaison, and they have a program coming up she just wants to mention to you really quickly.
Hi, everyone. I just went through this process last year and learned a lot in the last couple years. Just wanted to let you know that the PTSA is going to be putting on a program around, I think it's Wednesday, October 18th, but you'll get some information. And this year we're going to focus on having a panel of parents talk about how they assisted their child in selecting colleges. And I'm trying to find various different parents who have very different experiences and different approaches so that everybody can learn a little bit from them as to what they want to do and emulate, or maybe they don't want to do it that way. But I'm hoping it's to help you see this process from some parents' perspective who've been through this before. Thank you very much, and the PTSA is doing so much, and we are so appreciative of everybody, Mr. Palermo and the guidance department. Thank you so much for all you do.
Thank you again. My name is Brad McAdam, one of the counselors here. Just a quick tip when it comes to thinking about, Mr. Palermo was mentioning schools that are target schools, maybe reach. So how would you know where you fall in there, students? One really helpful thing to look at is the scattergrams that are in Naviance. Those are most helpful, I will admit, for in-state schools, because we have many more students that apply to Virginia schools than outside of Virginia, and so there's going to be more data there. Something to keep in mind, this came up when I was speaking with a parent today earlier. When you're looking at the scattergrams and it shows what the average GPA was for a student accepted to, let's say, James Madison University, that is a student's final GPA when they left George Mason High School, which could be vastly different from what it was when they applied to James Madison University. So because if you think about over the course of their senior year, they take many IB or AP or maybe dual enrollment courses that are weighted, so their GPA is going to be inflated by the time that senior year ends. So I just want you to keep that in mind, because sometimes students get a little skewed idea of, oh my gosh, I have to have a GPA up to there to even have a chance. Not necessarily the case, and that's why it's helpful to use those as a guide, but also maybe come talk to either Mr. Palermo or us, just to kind of get a better sense of kind of where you might fit in that whole picture, okay? Again, we're just going to quickly go through this because I know a lot of the questions that might come up would be specific to students, and we want to answer those more directly in a meeting with a student, and we just want to make sure everyone understands the process. Of course, Naviance is what we use to keep track of all documents that get sent to colleges. If you don't know what Naviance is, that means you're probably new to our school, and you'll need to meet with your counselor to talk a little bit more about that. If you've been here for more than a year and you don't know what Naviance is, definitely go see your counselor, because I'm worried for you. Again, Naviance can be accessed through our website. If you don't know how to log in, please see us. Mr. Palermo can help parents with logins if that's something that you are interested in doing. Many schools now use the Common Application. It's an incredibly useful tool for students and for us, because it's a way for you to send many applications out at one time without having to go to each individual school's website. It's found at commonapp.org. At some point, a student who is using the Common App will have to match their Common App account with their Naviance account. There's a very short video, I believe it's 2 minutes and 50 seconds, on Naviance under the Pages tab. That's on the home page. So that really is the easiest way to figure out what you need to do, but I'll tell you, we cannot send anything on our end if it's for a student using Common App until that matching has been done. So it's something, kind of important thing to keep in mind. Again, for schools that do not use the Common App, which there are many of those as well, students would apply directly through their website. And sometimes, I guess I take that for granted that students know that, but I had a kid come in the other day and he's like, how do I do it? How do I apply? And they didn't know. And so, of course, yeah, they don't apply, never applied to college before, so they wouldn't know that. So yes, you'd go to the school's website, look where it says apply, and then usually it's all done online. It's pretty straightforward. Again, this is really important. On a school's website, more often than not, it will tell students exactly what they need for the application process. You're going to send your application in. Oftentimes, it will ask you to send your SAT or ACT scores if that's required. It will ask for perhaps a letter of recommendation either by both a teacher and a counselor. Maybe sometimes it might just say a letter of recommendation. It could be from a teacher or a counselor. It might say 2 teachers and a counselor. So those things should be laid out on a website. If there's ever any uncertainty about that, you can either contact the school directly or come see us and we can talk to the admissions office to make sure we're clear on what needs to be sent. Of course, standardized tests need to be sent, and we're going to talk a little bit more about recommendations in a few minutes, but that's something to keep in mind as well. Some questions that sometimes come up as this process is going on. Do we rank students at George Mason High School? No. Okay. What is our GPA scale? We use a 4.0 GPA scale. Every GPA that we report is a weighted GPA. So students can end up with higher than a 4.0 because of our weight that we attribute to AP, IB, and dual enrollment courses. So even though we're on a 4.0 scale, it's important to remember, yes, a student could have higher than a 4.0. In our school profile that we send out to every school a student applies to, we describe how that weight is arrived at, and we talk about our GPA and all that. So all that information is taken care of. You don't need to worry about about putting that on an application. But if it asks about how we do our GPA, it's weighted and it's on a 4.0 scale. In terms of GPA, in terms of grades on your transcript, every semester grade only semester grades are what show up on a high school transcript. So first semester, second semester of every high school course you've ever taken will be on your transcript. Senior grades, we send mid-year grades. So no matter whether you've been accepted already or not, we will send your mid-year grades to every school you apply to. If a student requests, we will send first quarter grades to a school, and that's something you'd have to talk to your counselor about. But we will definitely do that if you'd like us to. Let's say you're doing really well first quarter, you want your college to see how you're doing. We can definitely do that. What do I do if the course name and transcript name are different? I forget. Why did we say that was a thing?
Sometimes, like, it might say on the transcript, like, we might abbreviate something. You're like, but it's always said on the syllabus. Put what's on your transcript. You all received copies of your transcript at the end of junior year. It's easiest just to use that.
Oh, wait, no, yeah, I know. And so, right, like in Common App, you're going to have to list all the courses you ever took. Yeah, so put whatever is on your transcript for that. Like when you have to list all your classes, that's what we're talking about. Okay. All right. Ms. Chesley, I'm going to stand up here with you about once in a while.
Good evening, everyone. Okay. So there's a couple different admissions options. The first one that probably everyone is familiar with is, actually we don't have it up here, early decision. That is a binding agreement. So that means you apply early, usually by November 1st, and you find out by usually about December 1st. If you get accepted, you have to go there. You can't get out of that. So unless a student really wants to go to a school, early decision isn't really something that, you want to think about unless it's your number one school and you're set on it. Early action, you apply early. You don't find out as early if you get in, usually end of January, most likely, January. It's not binding, so you're not bound to go to that school, but it's nice to have that option knowing if you get in early, okay, rather than waiting until March when regular decision comes out. Regular decision usually falls after the first of the year, anywhere from the first of the year to maybe early March, okay? Enrolling in admissions means as you apply, the admissions committee reviews your application and then makes a decision. Okay, essays. So I know in some of the English classes, like the dual enrollment, they're actually working on a college essay, but we have a lot of resources here at Mason to help your students. Their English teacher, Mr. Palermo mentioned the writing lab. So, if they're stuck and need help, definitely let them know there are places here. Us, absolutely, us. There's a lot of resources on like how to write a college essay, what colleges really want to hear. proofread carefully. This is really big because you know, this is the one piece of writing that a college is getting from you. So make sure that it's, you know, grammatically correct, no errors.
Can I make a comment? One thing I learned this last year is you're writing the essay in the college, you can actually cut and paste and do it on your own computer, the spell checking and everything, and then put it back. So you don't have to try to do it. Sorry.
Good tip, good tip. Test scores. So as we mentioned earlier, that's the student's responsibility to make sure the test scores are sent to the colleges. When they sign up for the SAT or ACT, they're able to have scores sent free to 4 different schools. Otherwise, I think it's about $12 or $13 per school. And, you know, make sure they don't wait until the last minute to do this. It's not like an automatic thing. It could take a couple days. It could take a week or so to process. So make sure this is something that gets on their radar. Okay, counselor recommendations. So the counselors, we write a letter for every one of our students. We base that letter on, you know, how, you know, our interaction with the student, their senior worksheet, and the parent brag sheet. Those are like 3 huge things. The more you write, the better for us. You know, you can't never really write too much. We really want to tell a college as much as we can about you. And especially the parent brag sheets are great because there's things in there that we don't know about you that it's really helpful for us to write about. But before we actually write that letter, we usually like to meet with the students once we receive the brag sheet and the senior worksheet in case we have questions about it. Or in case maybe you didn't write that much and we have some questions for you and we want you to kind of explain a little more so that we can write a better letter, because that's our goal, is to write the best letter we can for each of our students. I'm not going to go over FERPA. Ms. Reyes is going to be going over that.
May I say one thing?
You may.
Thank you. So just one note about the letters of recommendation. I really think it's important to emphasize that not every school that a student will apply to requires a counselor letter of recommendation. So if, let's say a student's applying early decision to Virginia Tech does not require a letter of recommendation from a counselor. And if that student is applying to early decision to Tech and that's the only school they apply to and they get in, there's absolutely no reason for parents to do a parent brag sheet and a senior to do a senior worksheet. So that's why it's important on your end, students, to do your homework a little bit to find out about the schools you're applying to see, is this school requiring a letter of recommendations? Because you don't want to waste your time doing a senior worksheet. You don't want to waste your parents' time doing a parent brag sheet. And you certainly don't want to waste our time with us writing a letter of recommendation that isn't required, because we write a lot of them. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, here are some deadlines. We really ask at least 3 weeks notice of your deadline so that we have time to write a letter. As Mr. McAdams said, we have a lot of letters to write, and you can't come to us 2 days before the deadline and expect a letter. So I think and this is available in the handout as well. So when should I submit the transcript request? Whenever you know for sure that you're applying to a school. That's the best time to do it. But know that it's not going to go out right away. Requesting transcripts, it's done. You have to do it through Naviance. It's the only way that we are going to know that you want a transcript sent to a school.
One more thing about that, again, same idea. Some schools now are asking students to self-report their grades. In those cases, example, University of Pittsburgh, students self-report their grades when they apply. We do not need to send them initially an official transcript. So there'd be no reason for a student to submit a transcript request for that school because we don't need to send them an official transcript. The only time in that case that we would send an official transcript is if the student decides to matriculate to Pittsburgh, and we would send them a final transcript. But if a student is self-reporting their grades, that means we do not need to send an official transcript. Okay.
Right, and a lot of the California schools are the same way. Okay, teacher recommendations. Hopefully, students, you've identified or at least are thinking about which teachers you want to ask. Maybe some of you already have. I know that a lot of students had done this in the spring. You want at least one teacher, if not 2. And there's a way for students to add their teachers in Naviance. And then you actually choose which schools you want that teacher to send a letter to. And I'm going to turn over to Ms. Reyes.
So one of the biggest things that we struggle with, that I think families seem to get a little bit confused about, is that on our homepage, it does indicate you can request a transcript through Miss Bird. That is not actually where you request your transcripts for colleges. That is if you're applying for a scholarship, or maybe you're applying for an insurance discount. You're just maybe a job. That's where those are those transcripts. Anything for colleges is through Naviance. So if you've requested something for her, for the college process, that won't actually be going to the college. So make sure anything again through for colleges is through Naviance. We're going to do questions at the end because we need the mic. Thank you. So parent authorization and FERPA. FERPA, I'm not going to go into the legalities of FERPA, but when you're doing the Common App through Naviance, they're going to ask you whether or not, they're going to have a FERPA release, and they're going to ask you whether or not you waive your right to read your letters of recommendation. The Common App FERPA release is only, it's applying to the colleges. So basically a lot of people say, well, should I waive my right? Should I not? It is a personal decision. We cannot tell you what to do. What I will tell you is that students, they want to read their letters. I don't blame them. I remember when I was applying to colleges, I was like, what did they say about me? I can guarantee we're never going to say anything that will be detrimental to your application process. If someone could not say something nice, they're not going to write your letter. Okay? A lot of people will not write a letter if you're not going to waive your right. That is something you need to be prepared for. So if you choose not to waive your right, we as a school have the right to say we're not going to write, we cannot write your letter. It's a level of comfort. We ask as professionals that you trust our judgment, and that we're going to put you in the best possible light, but it is your decision. Colleges don't always have to, if you do not waive your right, they do not have to allow you to read the stuff that was submitted. A lot of times if a student doesn't get in, they want to know why. It is up to the college discretion. So just something to keep in mind. FERPA can be kind of confusing, and if you have further questions about that, we can talk about that in another time. When should you submit your transcript request? So the deadlines are maximum amount, minimum amount of time. We would love as much time as possible. So if you already know where you're applying, you can do your submissions now. You could say, I'm applying to these 5 schools. I need a transcript request and letters, and we'll go ahead and just note that. I'm going to skip down one more thing. I requested my letters and transcripts weeks ago, and my counselor hasn't sent them. Why do they not care about me? And we care. I need you to keep in mind, number one, your deadlines are unfortunately not the college deadlines. And as much as you want them to go out the second you've submitted them, it can't work like that. I will tell you, we were looking at Mr. McAdams' numbers the other day. He has 295 students on his caseload, okay? Over 80 seniors, roughly. And he writes a letter for almost all of them. And he is going to put the most time and attention and thought he can into all of his letters, just like the rest of our counselors do. What that means, though, is we need to adhere to the deadlines of the school. We will not miss a deadline of the school. You need to, we can guarantee you that. But if you submit a letter of a request now, and the deadline is until January 1, unless you've told us you're applying for a scholarship or something else, we will adhere to the January 1 deadline, but we probably won't get it in for a while because we have other students applying early and all those good things. If you're applying to a school that is rolling admission, or there is an incentive to get it in early, I remember there was a school that, I can't even remember, was it Rice? They had changed to rolling admission, and we hadn't been totally aware, and their engineering program was super competitive, and things just hadn't been relayed to the student as effectively. They had filled their admission by October, enrolling admission, but their deadline wasn't until March. Had the student known, they would have let us know, and we would have gotten in early. We're happy to accommodate if there's something in that vein, but if it's just general admission and they'd read after the deadline, that's what we're going to adhere to. When do they see my senior year grades? Again, they'll be sent after the mid-year report. So we'll submit your transcripts again by the deadline, and then senior year grades, I believe, midterm grades, first semester grades are due February 8th. And so we typically get them out that next week, and we're right in line with all the colleges, all the schools in Northern Virginia. You'll probably get letters saying we don't have your mid-year grades, because they work with schools in Florida that had turned in mid-year grades a month before. We're in line with the Northeast. I promise it won't put your student at a disadvantage. The colleges, and the final question we get a lot, the colleges says they're missing something. What do I do? We ask that you give the schools a few weeks to get their stuff in their system. If we sent it last week, it probably hasn't shown up on their end yet. If it's been a few weeks and you know you've sent in your piece and we've sent in our piece, we ask you to reach out to the university. They have lots of students that man the phones. They might just not have updated your profile yet. If they're still saying they're missing it, reach out to us, and we're happy if we can resend it. We're happy to do that, or we have tracking numbers with all of our stuff sent through Naviance, so we know that it's been sent whether or not, and we can help with that. Okay? NACAC statement of principles of good practice. This is really important. NACAC is the governing agency for school, for, what's the acronym? Help me. National Associations of College Admissions Counselors, and this is just good practice. So actually, Mr. Palermo and Mr. McAdam went to the NACAC conference this past week, and they got some incredible information. But this is really this is the bare bones of kind of where you should be going, that you are writing your essay, that you are reporting anything. A lot of times students will drop a class mid-year. They're like, well, I don't really need it, and I already got in, and it's IB Psych. You don't need it for graduation. But if the school accepted you thinking you're taking IB Psych, you need to let them know you're not taking it anymore, because that could potentially change things, and it's on your honor. Schools' honor codes are very important to them, and we need to adhere to them just like you're there while you're here, and paying a deposit at one school. Really quickly, while Mr. Palermo is going to come up and talk about financial aid, one thing that you did receive tonight was our FERPA waiver. That's a new thing that has come out from our school and from central office. We are asking that all seniors sign the FERPA waiver, just so we have it on record. It is, again, your discretion of whether you'd like to waive or not waive your right, but we will need that signed by every senior before we send out any admissions information. We're going to link that on our homepage. We'll also shoot that out through Schoology. We'll have it in 50 million places, but we'll probably be hunting them down before we're able to send anything out. And if you have any questions of that, I'd be happy to answer that.
Financial aid and scholarships, and I know one certainly huge part of this is how does it all get paid for. So the basic core piece that helps schools determine what kind of aid they might be able to offer students is based on the FAFSA, and it's the free application for federal student aid, and it is students create an account. I know I do this for my 2 children, and you fill out basic information, financial information. You determine which schools you wish to send that information to. They use that information then to determine what kind of financial aid package, if any, your student would receive. There are links on the Mason College Career site, and tomorrow night there is a financial aid night at Marshall High School up the road that Mason families are welcome to attend. Scholarships, first of all, never pay to access scholarship information, unnecessary. There is a list in Naviance, and there's also a chronological list. These are the scholarships with September deadlines or October deadlines, et cetera. I have a link to that links you back to Naviance that goes in the college and career update. Some scholarships are, students are automatically in the running once they apply to schools. Some scholarships you need to apply to specifically. These are scholarships that schools offer. And some basic information. The school's CEEB number, for instance, need that when you're registering for tests. You may need that for the FAFSA as well. That can be found on the school's website, and this presentation will also be published for you to find as well.
So guys, we're going to take just some quick questions, and we want to obviously leave plenty of time for Mr. Bradbury to talk. We ask if you have a question. Ms. Kieran will walk around with a microphone. I know there were some hands up, and I want to get to you guys. And please feel free to ask anyone on our panel. Again, more specific, not specific questions about your student, but general questions about the application process.
Also, when you're talking to the microphone, it will not, like I'm doing right now, it doesn't project it anywhere, but it's so that the cameras can hear you. So don't be surprised if you can't hear yourself.
Thank you. A number of colleges that we have looked at on Naviance had just a few applicants from George Mason. So if we're looking at those colleges, how do we determine the likelihood of acceptance to rank it in terms of the criteria that you provided?
Great question. Anyone want to?
So one thing I always find is that the College Board actually has a great search feature, and that compares, students across the nation about their likelihood of getting in. So I would look at some of the other websites to really see the breakdown in like GPAs and SAT scores and things like that, especially for the schools where there might have been 3 or 4 kids have applied, and you really can't get a good feel on it.
Great question.
The SAT, ACT information transfer. So if our students took the test back in the spring and then they're taking them again in the fall, does it matter when they report that? I mean, the hope is always that you're going to do better every time that you take it, so you should wait. But it sounds like in the super score world, how do you decide that?
Anyone want to take that? So I will say not every school does allow for super scoring. That is something to keep in mind. Most do, but not everyone where you can pick and choose. And so I would say if you can't pick and choose, you might as well send it for free. But if you want to wait, as long as they get it by the application deadline, I don't believe there's any harm in waiting. Just know you're going to pay $13 or so per school. And if you have 10 schools on your list, that can get a bit pricey. But if you really are feeling like you've done a lot of prep work, your next test could be much better, there's no harm in waiting until afterwards, as long as they get them on time. I will say the rush feature, especially during regular admission time, you pay a lot more to rush it, and you're still not guaranteed to get it by the deadline. And remember, these schools don't need you need them. And so if you're missing a piece of your application puzzle, that isn't boding well. And so you want to make sure everything's in on time. That is super important. That doesn't totally answer, but
when you do your counselor letters, are you doing different counselor letters for different schools, or is it a counselor letter for the student, and if they're applying to 7 schools, it's one counselor letter, or just out of curiosity for that time frame, if they're applying early action at one place and regular decision at other places, how would you recommend they move on that?
Absolutely. I think the information overall is pretty general, what you write. We try to put the best information in our one letter, and if there's anything we would need to tweak for a specific school or program, we would. I will say that Mr. McAdam got some great information when he went to the NACAC conference about what schools are looking for in their letter. And so we don't want to give them a whole lot of fluff. We want that real meat that will help your applicant help them make the best decision possible. So I will say it's pretty much one letter unless it needs to be tweaked. But we do write individual letters for all of our kids. I will say there are no form letters that come out of here. We are writing real specific letters that talk about your student.
I just wanted to ask, to follow up on that, what exactly are they looking for in the recommendation letter, which can inform the preparation process?
That's a great question.
I think when you think about a student, in one of the sessions I went to at this conference I just went to was about the idea of holistic review of a application. And so when a student is applying, of course, it's not just the grades, it's not just the test scores, it's not just the activities, the sports, the working, the taking care of their young brothers and sisters. It's everything. It's the whole student. And so within a letter that we write, we try the best we can to kind of shine a bright spotlight on every aspect that a student has been a part of here at George Mason and in the greater community. And so that's why the parent brag sheet and the senior worksheet are so helpful, because we don't always know. I mean, obviously having as many students as we do, we don't always know all the specifics of a student's life especially outside of George Mason. And that's where it's really helpful to have that information, to be able to share that with the college and say, yeah, this kid's a great student, but look at all this other stuff going on with this student. It's amazing what this kid's doing. And so that's in a letter. Really what we're trying to get at is what makes this student sort of special And it doesn't have to, I'm not talking about curing cancer. I'm talking about doing things like working 25 hours a week at the pizza place or something. But that's one more thing that makes that student sort of stick out and say, hey, look at me. So that's what we're trying to do in a letter. And a teacher, just so you know, in a teacher letter recommendation, what they're really trying to do is say, here's what this student was like in my classroom as a student in that classroom. Not so much, that's more of a narrow focus, whereas we're trying to paint a bigger picture.
And I'm just going to add, in addition, we also talk about discrepancies there may be in the transcript, any special circumstances or mitigating circumstances that might have impacted grades or performance, whether they maybe started off here just taking mostly general ed classes and then have worked their way up and you're seeing an upward trend, trying to highlight the positives in their transcript and giving a little more clarification. So if there's anything that happened outside of school, you know, some of our students are super private, and that is absolutely fine. But there might have been things happening outside of this building that we didn't know about that might have explained why 10th grade was a disaster. And if you can shed some light on that, that'll help us explain why their grades might not be as strong as they had been.
If you already know the school you're going to apply to, you've done your request, but the application is perhaps not completely finished, would the transcript and the recommendation go before the actual application goes, or does the application have to be submitted before the rest goes?
Nope, doesn't have to be submitted before anything else goes. Once they start receiving, and I'll let Mr. Bradbury talk a little bit about that, but once they receive their first piece of information, they'll begin a file on you. So if that's the SAT scores, that's the SAT scores, no big deal. And again, we do not send the application. I think that's really important. That has to come from the student. See, no one over here. And this, I'm going to have this be the last question for now, so we have plenty of time.
Can you give us a little bit about early action versus holding back and applying for kind of the general, more open? I've heard different things. One, that they're going to take the best that they get and they'll fill their class with that early action, or they hold some back. And so you're better off because if they're holding 60% of their seats for the general admission, not to do the early action. So is there a school of thought?
Is there a school of thought? In what I've seen, at least in my history of being a counselor, is that a lot of schools are different. I remember Duke's statistics from last year, if I'm not mistaken, were astounding at the number of students they took from early decision, if I'm not mistaken. It was really mind-blowing for us. In terms of early action, if you know so with early action applications, if you know you really want to apply there, and you can put forth a great application, do it. A lot of times you might see higher admissions rate through early action applications, because those are kids that get their stuff done and have their stuff together. So they're going to put forward a really strong application. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have a better chance of getting in. It's more that they really have a well put together application that they're presenting to the committee, so they would have been accepted at any point. Every school has a different philosophy, so for me to speak holistically, I think I'd be doing you truthfully a disservice. If you can put it together and it's a great application, I say send it. If you struggled in junior year and you really feel like your senior year grades are going to help you, it can't hurt to wait. I will say that as far as I have seen, and I'll let Mr. Bradbury maybe challenge me on that, so please, if someone's not going to say no during early action if they would have said yes during regular decision. If they have any questions on your application, you're kind of on that border, they'll defer you. I think schools are very happy to defer their students to their regular admission pool and get those senior year grades and have a full view before they make a full decision. A yes would have been a yes, early action or regular. Does that clarify it a little bit? Not really, maybe a little. Not an easy answer. Okay guys, we'll have a little bit of time at the end for questions, but I would like to, Mr. Palermo has a lovely introduction.
All right, so Mr. Bradbury is a proud graduate of Elon University in North Carolina, where he has worked for the past 41 years. He is the Associate Dean of Admissions and Financial Aid. He has served as a chair of the Southern Region of the College Board. He loves his job, and I can attest that his students love him as well. One of our counselors attended Elon years ago, and she always has a big smile and wonderful things to say about him when you mention his name. We are so pleased that Mr. Bradbury has agreed to join us for this second year in a row and for this very important and informative evening. Please welcome Mr. Bradbury.
It's always a pleasure to be here at George Mason High School. I know the difference between George Mason and George Marshall High School. Half the people that come here do not know that they're two schools. So pretty good back. No, I've been at Eli, it's actually my 42nd year in admissions, and it's been such a pleasure for me because I'm talking to people I've talked to 25, 30 years ago that have sons and daughters ready for college. Makes you feel older than dirt, and I'm actually known as being the Dick Clarke of admissions. So, so y'all know who Dick Clarke is. Some people don't. My job tonight is really to fill in the blanks and color in the blanks, and also put the lines together and connect some dots, because you had a great overview of what's going on right now. But a few things I want to remind you: what you have done, what you should have done, what you could do that maybe got left out over the summer. First thing is, I think we need to calm you all down, because if I had a selfie shot of you guys, you're a bunch of uptight people sitting in nicely dressed uptight people sitting in an audience. So really, calm down a little bit, okay? Also, there's an exercise, if you haven't done this already, you may want to try it now, and it's not too late, is that, you know, schools are changing an awful lot, and one of the things we have parents and students do, we have a list where your students put a list of schools together, and parents, you put a list together, then you switch the list. What's really eye-opening when you actually read your students' list, there's schools on your students' list that you wouldn't have sent your dog to obedience school 20 years ago. You say, wow, that's a flea bag. Everybody got in there. And the problem is, and the good thing is, everybody's gotten better over the last 20 years. Because I'm giving you at least 18 or 20 years since y'all were in school, okay? And it's gotten a lot better. And that's the one thing I think people have to understand. That's where people are getting disappointed or disillusioned in the admissions process of thinking they can really figure this out. And then our time going through school, you know, the way you figured out where you could go to school is you'd have a relative that you either thought you were smarter or they were smarter than you. You'd apply, you'd get in, or you didn't get in. And it wasn't rocket science. So what goes on right now is that, you know, everybody has a profile and has the range of GPA and SAT, because what happens when you see an average GPA and average SAT, we have found through research it freezes people. They see the average GPA, average SAT, they feel they can't get past that. So one of the things that has been helpful, that everybody has a profile, so you have a pretty good idea of what a school is looking for with the range of GPA and SAT. Now the key is you don't want to be somewhere way up here past the profile, you're bored silly, but you don't want to be at the bottom of the class where yes, you got in, but you're treading water from day one. And I think that's where so many students get themselves in a real pickle. They find they're getting in someplace and it's something that's not quite right for them, or they fail to apply somewhere that would be a great choice for them that didn't realize, because as we mentioned before, in a holistic way of reviewing applications, students have a lot of desirable characteristics we like to have on university campuses, and we need you worse than you probably need us in some cases. What also is really interesting is, since things have changed so much, there are a few things I want to kind of try to figure out where you are in this process. How many is the very first going off to college this year? The second going off to college? Third going off to college? Whoa, fourth. You third-year people, basically, you could write a book, and I'll be your agent at Barnes & Noble. You could write one great book, I tell you, because you lived through it, and you don't see anybody with war scars on them from this. You know, you really lived through it, it'll be fine. But what is so funny is that there's so many things that are beyond your control in this process. Also, some things you sort of can control. But there are things that just make me just laugh out loud in a lot of cases of watching people have so much anxiety and pressure over things that 6 months from now, you or those who did the veterans of 3 years or more, 3 students or more, you know, you're just sitting back, oh, it's just fine. What are you worried about? So let's try to lower this anxiety level down. One of the biggest anxieties you have is basically worrying about majors. And I think what has happened in this society right now, there are only 3 majors that anyone thinks worth even pursuing: pre-law, pre-med, pre-engineering, okay? The pre-med students hate biology, pre-law students are terrible public speakers, and pre-engineering people hate math. But they're the easiest thing to talk about at a family reunion, and you get out there and you just rip that out there, even though it would be an anthropology major instead, and they say, what can you do with anthropology? And then you have to explain that later. But those 3 majors are the ones you will mostly talk about. And majority of the time, students will change their minds 8 ways from Sunday, even though they put that out there. It's what they're looking for. One of the greatest things about having Mr. Pinero with the Career Center and also being in this area of the country, you know, you all are very attuned to careers and majors, but I travel through various areas through the state, here in Virginia and in North Carolina, and there are a couple of places now that they do not have career centers. They are not as fortunate to have career centers. So they have what they do. The week before we show up for the college fair, we have career units. And the career unit thing is a hoot and a half, man. I tell you, they get out there and, the week before we show up, they get them out there and they have every senior in a classroom and they bring professionals from all kinds of occupations in to talk to students. 1 year is nursing, 1 year is occupational therapy, 1 year was engineering, 1 year was architecture. My most memorable year was about 5 years ago. We were in Southwest Virginia, and all of a sudden the big topic was radiology. Is anyone here a radiologist? Okay, limited program, not many schools in the country have it, lucrative, make a pile of money, but what would go on is that we would go through the college fair, and we all sit in a line together, and we all look alike at the college fairs, except we're the blue blazers and the khakis, and the E's are all together and so on. So we get out there. About the second day we were traveling, I was really starting to get bothered because nobody wanted to talk to me because I didn't have radiology. Had a young man come up to me, he said, "Do you have radiology?" I said, "No, I do not." He said, "Do you have football?" "Yes, I do." Let's start filling out the card. I said, "Well, why do you want to major in radiology?" And the young man looked me in the eye and he said, "People say I have a great voice. I'd be a great sports commentator on the radio." Now, I don't know how many people lost out on a career on ESPN out there in Southwest Virginia, but I tell you what, I'm worried. I'm a little concerned out there. So kind of got past that. So you get this major thing worked out, you're going to be okay, because most students are truly undecided, and majority of the students, you don't have to make a decision until the second semester of the sophomore year. Also, the types of schools you're looking at, 4-year, 2-year. I was a product of the 2-year junior college, first in my family to go to college. I was a young man from Virginia Beach that spent half his time playing in cars and on surfboards and wasn't sure I was going to go to school. So I had some people very influential in my life to push me forward to get me through this. And I needed short-term goals. And what happens, you take different roads to get to that final journey. So that's how that pretty much will work out for students in the long run. Now, after you've had a chance, this past year, you had a chance to kind of look at all these schools and looking for majors. You started visiting the campuses. And, visiting the campuses have been really helpful to you. What is so interesting about visiting campuses, everyone has a different way in which they approach things. You have an information session, you have a tour, they have open house programs. So different ways in which you go. You like to have a chance to check out the community a little bit. If you visit during fall break, or you did it this year, give them 50 extra points. Visit in summer, 100 extra points. If it rains, 100 extra points. If there's a school that's the number one choice to drop down to number 50 after the summer visit, take them back one more time because I think that might reaffirm that it was not all that bad to begin with. But we find the visits are very, very important. And then you get to the point where you're looking at academic profiles I mentioned before and also applying to college and universities. And the application process is absolutely daunting because so many families, it's so different maybe what it was when we were going through because majority of us basically years ago did rolling admission. And you'd apply, you'd get in, there'd still be the early decision crowd out there going through that process, but the majority of us did the rolling process. And I think what will happen in this process too is that people get scared off simply because they'll look at these profiles. So what we would have you do is try to figure out if you have a possible major, that's pretty good. If you like the location, that's pretty good. And what is counterintuitive to what you would think about, we'd advise you only apply to 5 schools instead of 10 or 15. This past year, I had a student who applied to 26 schools and $1,500 in application fees, had a little conversation with, "Hey, dude, you only go to one school." But his parents were up from this area. They said he had to apply. He wasn't going to apply to 30, but to 26. So when you get the application process, there are different ways to apply, and it's pretty much outlined. The Common App is the most common. This is the one that a lot of students are applying, that you have a chance to send it out to a lot of different places. But even if you do the Common App, you have to put a lot of time and effort into making sure that application's in order. Also, in the application process, the big rage would be early decision. And early decision, I can give you 2 good reasons not to go early decision anywhere. If you're the high-end scholar trolling for scholarship students with special talent, early action, final deadline, regular deadline can serve you. The high-end scholar, yes, you've had a chance to talk to your counselor and found out you might be in the honors program at X, Y, or Z university, and you may find that you will not have an answer until March 15th or April 1st. If you had your heart set on the honors program at that one school and you don't get it, your early decision, you're committed. Or your student is special talent, fine arts or athletics. Fine arts, audition in the fall, audition in spring, notified March. Be tragic to have been accepted early decision and not getting in the program. Athletics, there's no telling how it's going to happen for you. You might be at first having a Division III school and all of a sudden Division I rolls out March, April, May, June. So That's something where I call them a bonus baby or a special talent person. The early action might do better than early decision. But check with each school to find out what they look for early decision. My case, I look for the student that might be the legacy, that might have something that is that they are committing to us. So we have, as you mentioned before, the higher percentage in our case would be accepted under early decision because they're definitely coming. And we do a lot of counseling to make sure they're doing it for the right reason, not just to snag a spot. And if the word financial is in your vocabulary, you would never go early decision anywhere, even though Mr. Palumbo mentioned you can apply for aid on October 1st now. You're not going to have a final answer in need-based or merit money till March 15th or April 1st of the senior year in high school. Early action, I'm a big fan of early action. It gets you in the profile early, and worst case scenario, as you mentioned before, you might be deferred. Defer is not a decline. I had people raise and came with me, oh my goodness, I got declined. No, you didn't. Yeah. You were deferred. We waited for fall semester grades, more recent SATs. And also, if there's a wing and a prayer that it's going to work, we're going to defer the student rather than decline the student. But under early decision, you can be declined under early decision because we don't want to drag a person through the gauntlet if it's not going to happen. And that's another thing from an ethical standpoint that we want to make sure families are able to understand that, and if it's not going to work, that student still has opportunities to have applications at other places. But early action, I'm a big fan of early action. Also, many schools have a large percentage of early action that are accepted under final deadline. And the final deadline, regular deadline, again, it depends on what the school's philosophy might be and also what they are looking for. And then the rolling situation, what's interesting in Northern Virginia, this is why we had to move to deadline admission. I would come to George Mason High School, schools in Fairfax County. You all are Johnny on the spot, man. You nail that application. You'd have an answer by January 1st. And then we had a March 15th deadline. By March 15th, we were full. So all these fine people in Northern Virginia took all the good spots, and you still had till May 1st to make your final decision, but it was something where we had no room at the end of the process. And it's really depending on how you're going to go through the process. Standardized testing, that's something where I think you all have more anxiety than you could ever imagine simply because it's such a mystery. And see, the SAT has had several iterations over the last few years. Now, parents, I'm going to make you feel so good going home, you're going to be obnoxious when you go back to work tomorrow morning. What happened about 3 years after most of you all ended up going off to college and taking the SAT? They recentered the SAT, so take your score, add 100 points to it, you are Einstein driving home. Yeah, they recentered the SAT. And then they had critical reading, math, and writing, and that was something else I thought was rather interesting because what would happen, I come to George Mason High School and a person would say, a B here is really an A. Nah, not really. But it was something where they'd say, you know, it's English teacher, what would happen, we would see the B in the class, we'd see a writing score off the Richter scale. So in a way, yeah, you know, you probably will. We can't change the grade, but it does really give us an indication how students were doing in the process. The new SAT right now is taking most schools. It'll take us 2 years to figure it out because we had one class go through. We have a concordance table we're going to review. So the last class, this class in 2019, it's the year of curriculum. This is where you finally, when it's all said and done, your grades, and not so much your grades, but the curriculum, the classes you've taken will absolutely help you in the process. Now, speaking of grades, how many of you have obnoxious relatives? All right, how many have obnoxious relatives and at the 4th of July picnic or what you had going on at Labor Day, there was some clown in your family bragging about their son or daughter having a higher grade point average your son or daughter? Raise some hands out here, okay. And you were so upset about it, you got back in the car, you pounded the steering wheel, got all upset. But what happens, y'all, the nice thing is the truth always endures. Yes, the person had a higher grade point average, but they had metal shop, wood shop, food for the family. They can bake a cake, fix a car, and build a birdhouse. But they've not had advanced placement, international baccalaureate honors, or dual degree credit. So what we tell you, what your counselors tell you, curriculum rules. That is really something that has really proven it. In the state of North Carolina right now, I hate to admit that everybody has a 4.0. The grade inflation is really high. State of Georgia is kind of high too. So that's where you have to depend a little more on standardized testing. And also, in our case, in many schools, we recalculate the grade point average for the pure core classes. And as I said, here, in my case, everyone recalculates a little higher. And again, the other thing that we do, people say, well, you don't know my high school. Well, yeah, I do. What we do, we see who applies, who enrolls, who graduates from X high school. That's how it works. And the better schools that you might be considering, or your sons and daughters considering, that's how they do it. You can't really go by the grid. You've got to really look at it individually. And the outcomes make a real big difference on how that works. So when you look at the outcomes and see how people work, it kind of gives you when you're talking about family connection, Naviance, the first thing you can do after I speak tonight, you can see what the lowest person we took from George Mason High School, that's me. And what has happened, y'all, that's either first chair tuba player, or it was somebody that a building is named after on our campus. That's basically how that works, you know. But now, in our case, it is tied to some specialized things with the application process and desirable characteristics. But you can't, it's a good guide, but that is not the essential, yes, that's what's going to get you in X, Y, or Z universities. And different schools have different needs. Right now, I need somebody from North Dakota. 49 states, North Dakota. Anybody from North Dakota? Have you been in North Dakota? Nobody comes to North Carolina from North Dakota. What's the problem? So that's going to help us with diversity in some way, shape, or form. We want to have geographic diversity. Some from North Dakota. So send someone my way, okay? But there are different students. Right now, if you're finding any of you looking for the Northeast, they kill for someone from the South, period. Also, from here, going south and out west, those schools are looking, California schools are looking for people from Virginia. So there are a lot of different places, and schools have different needs. So take advantage of that. Make sure it would work. Also, I think what's going to happen, too, is in the process, I think when you've had your chance to meet admissions people, we're all a pretty friendly bunch, you know, for the most part. But I tell you what, I want to refresh your memory of some of the places you've been already and see if it rings true for you. First thing is, you've probably been at one school or two or 5 or 10 that you walked into a grand auditorium, there's someone at a podium with a microphone and a spotlight on them, and the person giving the presentation had their nose so far up in the air they had to pipe in sunshine and oxygen. And it's actually if they had, you know, they were doing you a favor to have you in their audience. And they sit up there and put their grid. If you don't have this GPA or SAT, you need not apply. Thank you. And then they walk away. Or the other one I call Billy Joe PowerPoint. Boy comes on in there, rips out that PowerPoint, click, 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 reads the whole thing to you, and then you say to yourself, you know, you could have just phoned that puppy in for me, and send me the map and let me walk around. The schools you're going to remember are the ones who try to find reasons to accept students. And I can tell you, my colleagues at some very high-ranking schools, Phi Beta Kappa schools, that's how they think. And you can pick up on that, especially from the standpoint of actually meeting these people and talking with them. So that's where you want to try the philosophy that will work for you. The applications themselves and how they're viewed. The front part of most applications are biographical in some cases. In some cases, you may find a school has a special place for legacies. So if your son or daughter is applying to your alma mater, hopefully they're going to give you some special love out there. The second thing, we talked about the counselor's evaluation. This is something, up here in the Washington area, there's been a vicious rumor out here that I've got to kind of cut down a little bit and put y'all in a calmer setting. Someone up here has said, unless you have your congressman, senator, or CEO of a corporation writing your behalf, nobody's going to pay attention to your application. Have y'all heard that one? You're doing it. You send them out to us, man. You blast those puppies out there, and we read them. We had a congressman in North Carolina, bless his heart, wrote one of the best recommendations I've ever read in my life. I can recite it. It's so good. He said, I know the mother of the grandmother. I do not know the student. If she's anything like the mother of the grandmother, she'll be a great student at your school. We took her. Yeah, we took her. No. But yeah, we sure did. No, the counselor's recommendation really helps us out a lot. I mean, you would be very pleased to see what comes from the counseling office here. Even if for new counselors coming in with your fact sheet, the brag sheet, I really mean that comes across. And the thing that's helpful with school counselors, they basically know who applied from George Mason to X colleges, the profile, everything. And it's such an honest evaluation of positive reinforcement, because I've never really read, I wouldn't say I've ever read a negative recommendation from counselors. Some are a little more wordy than others, but that's something where I can assure you that they write great recommendations. As a matter of fact, the way this counseling staff writes, they write like they're at a private high school instead of a public high school. And I can tell that with 42 years of experience reading the ones. The other part from the standpoint of recommendations, teacher recommendations, many schools require that, but I ask you to avoid the teacher with the reputation of being the Betty Crocker famous Amos cookie cutter recommendation writer. Do you know where I'm going with this one? Your name and wrong college name, signature at the bottom. This Sunday, I'm having dinner with the James Madison University staff. We all like each other too. That's the other thing. We all cross-pollinate. And we talk about basically what goes on. You know, they get all the stuff from Elon, I guess from James Madison, we laugh about it. But it's just one of those things, if a teacher were to write a recommendation for you, I would really ask them to get the profile of your school, our school, and know the student better, because in so many cases, the difference a teacher recommendation might have as opposed to a counselor's recommendation, it's sometimes 5, 6, 10 years out that they even have any knowledge of the school. And for us, it's really something, and then sometimes it gets a little sloppy, but it's just something where we laugh about it, but it's something that doesn't penalize the soul other than we get a good laugh out of it. But it's one of those things, the recommendations can help in many cases. Another big rumor going around here in Northern Virginia, and the activities list. Join 4 clubs fall semester of your senior year in high school. You're really impressive admissions people. You heard that one? Okay. We'd like to see that you have 3 major activities. You've been a major participant consistently for 3 years on one activity that rocks your world. It might be fine arts, it might be athletics, it might be scrapbooking, it might be fishing. Whatever it is that you have a passion in your life, will run with it. And it's so sad to see someone try to put that wild activities list together, and it just really doesn't make a lot of sense. Leadership, also, this is another thing where it gets exaggerated. Guess what? Not everybody's president, student body, captain of the football team, captain of the cheerleaders. Y'all know that. The different ways in which you lead, so you don't have to knock those people off of those coveted positions. Next thing, service. We're looking for sincere service. You do not have to, and people feel that unless you have something exotic overseas or something that is affiliated with some organization, we're never going to pay attention to it. Friends, we have a lot of good, sincere service to do right here in Northern Virginia, and you can do it without having to travel and not have to spend a dime and give back to society. So some families have got this mixed message that you have to do something big and exotic to be impressive. It doesn't have to be that way. Work, we value work for the simple reason is I think it came up in you want to find if you show up on time, you have a pleasant appearance, you play well with others. It's one of those things that may not, and the reason it's so important, it may not happen until the senior in high school, first year in college, but to have an internship on a university campus, you have to have had some type of work experience somewhere along the way before they're going to really, and it can be Five Guys, you might be working at Food Line, you might be working in different places. It isn't one particular job that's going to stand out, but the work is helpful. Also, with awards recognition, if it has an acronym, let us know what it's all about. Sometimes these acronyms, you don't know what they stand for, so spell it out. If it's a brochure of a special program. And the last thing is the essay. The essay is the thing that some schools do not care less about it. Some schools have 5 of them. I really believe the schools that require 5 essays, they don't read them. You know, I really don't think they do. I seriously don't think they do. I just think it's something to see to wear out the people and see who's going to eliminate the. Yeah, if you can do 5, you get yourself on over here, man. We might read the number 5 just for the heck of it. Now, I think they're just really trying to wear you out. Now, some schools are really big into that. In our case, we use it because it's tied to a scholarship program. Also, it's a personal statement optional. Optional is code word for what? Do it. Got it. There's another thing. Last year, it's really interesting doing these times. I did 26 of these programs last year with Virginia Tech, Virginia, William & Mary, and James Madison. And we came up with this little thing called Explain, Don't Complain. And Explain, Don't Complain is when it's on a sheet of paper to a dean or a vice president of any university in the country, explain any unusual circumstance you've had. Some students have had 3 different high schools in 2 years. They've been overseas, had a health issue. The reason the piece of paper rules. Parents are writing essays, writing recommendations, sign the student's name to them and send them to admissions offices. That is an honor violation, y'all, if you really do it. Now, last year it was really funny. After they cut the cameras off, I said, how many of you have started your essays? And 3 parents raised their hands. I wish I had it on tape. I really do. I wish I had it on tape. That was great, man. I had to tell my vice president about that. So, they're really working hard down there at George Mason. But it's really something, it means well, but it's one of those situations where seriously, we want to make sure we have good information. And Explain, Don't Complain, not a school in the country will be willing to read this, because first thing is we never see anything on paper anymore. And the second thing is, for the schools, the good schools that are trying to find reasons to accept students, you have your essays, the epic novel, your feature film, your personal statement optional is your public service announcement, your commercial. Explain, Don't Complain, it rolls it all together and makes it work. So that's something where it makes it work, it will work, and we want to see who is driving the bus in this process. It is very important for us to know. From the standpoint of financial aid and scholarships, Bob mentioned that just a moment ago. There's more financial aid out there than you can ever imagine. You don't need to have to pay anyone to find resources for financial aid. There's plenty of award opportunities out there. Also, there may be transcripts, there may be interviews that are involved with this process, and that usually is what makes the difference of getting them. There are a lot of there's like left-handed people drink Pepsi on Thursday. You've heard all those. They actually do exist. They're out there. Take advantage. They're usually one-time scholarships. So I would take advantage of that. Also, there's a big disconnect in the academic world. 25 to 35% of all first-year students are in the honors programs at many universities. And what the big disconnect is, there's only 8 to 10% that receive athletic scholarships. And for some reason, so I'll go to the college fair at Fair Oaks coming up in a couple of weeks, and they'll say, if Johnny doesn't have a baseball scholarship, he won't be able to go to college. Well, guess what? He probably won't be able to go. It's a situation where there's a big disconnect on that. Also, athletes also have opportunities for academic scholarship opportunities, can be in honors programs, and student athletes do well on university campuses, especially from here. So it's one of those things of investigating everything that you have out there. One of the things that most schools don't even talk about, and this is some things I want, well, the 3 things, again, I'd like for you to first to only apply to 5 schools, because if you do more than 5, if we still have the paper application, I can pick out number 6. I really could, because people get jazzed for the first 2, 3rd, 4th. Number 5, woo, it's kind of bringing it down a little bit. Now, for fine arts students, yes, you might apply for 8 or 10 schools. That's a different situation, because fine arts is recruited differently. But for the most part, a regular student going through the process, do the 5. And if you do your research correctly, you'll get in 3 out of 5, 4 out of 5, or 5 out of 5 choices. And that's something that I can almost take it to the bank. You could probably do that, especially if you do your research correctly on the schools. You can't tell from year to year what schools are looking for, but you have a pretty good idea. And also, demonstrated interest is a big part of many schools, and it's usually out on websites. And demonstrated interest means, I'll be visiting George Mason tomorrow at 9:30. Students who come by to see me, I'm going to make sure I know who they are. Also, what you'll find, the person who walks into George Mason High School that from a humongous, huge, big, you think not caring school, that is the person who says so on that application. So this is a huge luxury for us to have a chance to meet people face to face. Campus visits sometimes, it is demonstrated interest. Interviews are sometimes required or not required, and interviews should be conversational, not interrogational. So many schools, students come in and make a person really feel terrible because they had to go in for an interview. Honors programs will involve an interview in many cases. Maybe a Skype interview somewhere on the way, but make sure you can do it. Also, how you can impress admissions people if a student can talk on a telephone? Really? You think that's a little outlandish? Because if you have any time an admissions person calls and asks to have a student return a call, 9 times 10 is pretty good news. Or they send this elaborate emails that really you find in emails, and parents, you can figure this out too. It's either yes or no, there's no shade of gray. And everybody's looking for a shade of gray, right? And this is where if you have the conversation with the admissions person, it can help. And what we find out, especially when I talk to juniors, or I talk to juniors here at George Mason in the Career Center, they may know we don't even have the major they're looking for, and I can recommend another school for them. But it's something where there's so many things that we can concern ourselves about. And also the phone call that is the most difficult, that carries a lot of weight, is the student who's declined after early action on December 20th. There are 2 types of phone calls. You either have one where it's a raging parent that is just going absolutely off the hook and is ready to come after us, or the student said, "Dear Dean Bradbury, I was declined. What will it take to get me at your school next year?" Guess what? That person has the #1 slot January that next year. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And my colleagues at a lot of the very prestigious schools you all might be looking, they feel the same way. So student ownership carries an awful lot of weight. Now, by knowing the 5 schools, getting 3 out of 5, 4 out of 5 schools, 3 important things to remember when they choose a college. First thing is try to find a college that has an academic program that suits you. If it's not in a brochure, it does not exist on the university campus. Do not get taken in by independent major. Independent major, usually, in most cases, you need to have 65 semester hours first semester. But a first-year student for independent major, you'll be 7 years going to college, okay? 4 is enough, okay? So look at 4. Second thing, surrounding some people. Have you ever seen a brochure of people with frowns on their faces? Besides my athletic brochure last year. Have you ever seen a brochure of buildings in ill repair? Have you ever seen a college video where it rains other than the rainforest? Beautiful people, bright smiling faces, great video, great website. You see it and experience it. And last and probably the most important thing, try to find a college that suits your personality, the students. And if it doesn't work. And there are 3 things that will work. It comes together, and it will work for you. Also, the other thing that most families are not even concerned with right now is first-year retention. Most schools don't want to talk about it. Retention is probably the single most important thing, other than how the daylights you're going to pay for it, than how you're going to work through this. And there's some trends in higher education right now that are going to be changing this year. What you're going to find are the 5 schools your sons and daughters will be choosing and being accepted. 3 of the 5 will be 90% or better. 2 of the 5 will barely hug 60%. And your jaw's going to hit the ground when you see who they are. Fun places, great athletic programs. They gave you a bunch of scholarship money, but they're losing half their freshman class. And the thing is, though, that's one of the few things we have a little bit of control over. I had a parent call me several months ago about a daughter not coming to our school and said, it's a shame she's made a decision on 6 Saturdays in the fall about football. So it's something where there are different ways in which people make decisions. And then the nice thing that's really nice about this is that from April 1st to May 1st, you know what the whole process is from that point on? Speed dating. Speed dating. You're going to go out, you've been accepted at all the schools, and your son or daughter's going to go on a campus and meet somebody that's the love of their lives, or they're going to have the best lunch they've ever had in their life, best piece of pizza they've ever had, the nicest professor, you talked to the president, shook hands with you. It's all these things that really are inconsequential how it works, but it works. It really does. So for us, it's something where get it through the gauntlet, get those 5 acceptances in your back pocket, and you'll be set. One concern we have right now, if you look at Family Connection and Naviance and you look at the scattergram, there's some students that I imagine parents you said, I'm surprised Billy got in there. It just kind of see, yeah, he's there. And what we're going to find is going to happen this year is that many schools after January 1st are going to see who's left after Christmas. Because some schools kind of dipped this year a little bit because they were concerned about enrollment, and there might be some people, yes, they got in, but it's not going to be fun in River City for the spring semester. And also it's something too where students are making better decisions, but also I think students are making so many decisions solely on financial, which definitely is a big part of it, but from financial, you really need to know what school's in good shape right now. There are schools that really have some serious financial situations out there, and you can read about in the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools, the SACS website. And if you look, there's certain websites for different parts of the country, but you can see who's on probation, who's had issues. And again, some of the schools that have serious issues are offering more scholarship money than they've ever had in their lives. And also looking at statistics of who was up this year, who was up last year, increase in tuition, a loss of faculty, new leadership. There are different ways and different aspects of this process that can really help you be a better, well-informed consumer in the process. And for you as parents, you really do need to calm down a little bit. You really do. I know it's easier said than done, but the whole thing is you're going to be fine. And my last thought I'd like to share with you is every one of you in this room, you must become theater majors. What you need to do is practice your poker face. Because if there's a college university that that your son or daughter knows you want them to attend, they're never going to go to that school. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bradbury, it's always very enlightening, and I love the stories. Guys, we're going to take a few minutes. Obviously, I'm sure you want to get home. Many of you probably haven't had dinner yet. I have some children to put to bed, hoping they're asleep. But are there any questions either for us or for Mr. Bradbury before we close for the evening?
So many of us at the school, we have international experience, which seems to me should be a big asset, but kind of hard to leverage. I mean, your teachers won't know what you did before you moved here. The counselor won't know. The brag sheet doesn't convey it very well. So how do you leverage that into something for admissions?
I'm sorry?
That would be something where the student could put under explain, don't complain as something that's different, because with the essay, we're fishing for something, personal statement, something extra, but the explain, don't complain, the little extra piece you add helps connect the dots. A lot of times we can't, if we don't know about that, we can't connect the dots. We may see something about a transcript or someone was somewhere else, or it might show up in a resume, but it helps us pull it all together. And that is such a positive reinforcement for any student at any school when they're trying to go through the process, because that's just one extra thing they're doing. And again, what we like to see is that something is, we're looking for the positives. We're trying to find reasons to accept students.
Anyone else? Oh, she's going to come around. Give us 1 second. Sorry.
Okay, in my case, our daughter just transferred here, so her first 3 years of high school were back in Nebraska. Is it better to have a teacher back at her old high school write her letter of recommendation, or are the teachers that she has now going to know her well enough to write a good letter of recommendation?
That's a fantastic question. Can I defer to you to ask? You want to go ahead and answer that?
Yeah. The counselor's evaluation would still come from here, but anything you have from any other place that could be added as supplemental information. But we're in under early action, or even early action is something where we're still going to have other information coming to us at later times. But if we have people that are from overseas that are new, and that might be something for someone too from an academic standpoint. If you're doing early action, fall quarter grades as a request is a possibility to see the students doing well. But again, we're trying to make sure the people most familiar with you can do that. And again, from our situation, we still, even though they are new here, I think you'd be very pleased how this group of counselors are able to write, especially with the brag sheet, to put things together for you. You're not going to get shortchanged.
And if I can just add, if you had a transfer student and you're looking to get a recommendation from someone outside of our building, it can get a little complicated if your student is applying through the common application. So we just ask that you speak with the counselor. They might not be able to use what's called the teacher recommender. For those of you that are using a teacher from another school, it might have to be an additional recommender. And we can walk you through that process. Guys, I'm going to honor our time. Thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.